I'm going to show you how to make one of the most classic frostings. This is Swiss meringue buttercream. It's silky, buttery, smooth, and it's not as sweet as traditional American buttercream. It does take just a little bit more technique and work than classic buttercream, so I'd call it a beginner to intermediate level, but it's totally doable at home. Let me show you how it's done. First thing you need to know is you're going to need a double boiler for this recipe, just because we're going to be dissolving our sugar and cooking our egg whites. I set this up super simply. I just take the bowl for my stand mixer, because the stand mixer is going to make this very easily, and a pot that it fits in. And the important thing is that the bowl you put in your double boiler is not touching the water on the bottom. This pot only has about an inch of water in it. And this bowl needs to be completely clean, dry, and grease-free on the inside. That's because we're working with egg whites, and egg whites don't do well with additional water or moisture. Now, before we get started, I really want to talk to you about one of our most important ingredients, which is our butter. You're going to need 1.5 cups of butter for this recipe, and I prefer an unsalted butter. One of the key success tips I can give you for having this recipe turn out successfully is you want to let this soften to room temperature. So ideally, when we're adding this to our meringue, it should be the same temperature as the meringue is. If it's too cold, it can make things difficult for you and the frosting can break. If it's too soft, that can also be a problem. You don't want it to be melty or oily. So I usually pull this out before I begin the recipe. And then because I want it to reach room temperature evenly and not be super cold in the center and warm on the ends, I'll usually just go ahead and cut it into tablespoon-sized pieces now. This is going to be necessary later on anyway, and this is just going to help it kind of soften evenly. So for the egg whites, you're going to want to use 6 large egg whites for this recipe. Separating your egg whites from the egg yolks is a little bit easier when the eggs are cold, but you're really going to want to use room temperature eggs for this recipe. These are room temperature. We're just going to go ahead and crack it, and the easiest way, in my opinion, to separate is just to pass that yolk back and forth, let the white drop into a bowl, and then we'll add this into a measuring cup. Egg whites can be a little bit finicky, so it is important you don't get any yolk in there with your egg whites. And again, clean, dry, oil-free, grease-free, very important. I'm going to go ahead, and this doesn't need to be here yet. I'm just going to add the egg whites right into my bowl along with our sugar. Unlike traditional American buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream uses granulated sugar. This is 1 3/4 cup. We're also going to add 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. We're going to whisk these ingredients together until all of that sugar is nicely combined. Now we'll take our mixing bowl and our pot for our double boiler, and we'll head over to the stovetop. For the water, we are going to want this to come just to a simmer. No rapid boil, just a nice gentle simmer. Once this is simmering, we're going to just rest this bowl right in there, and we're going to start whisking and keep whisking pretty much constantly. We're going to do this until the sugar is completely dissolved and the eggs reach at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit. To tell if the sugar's dissolved, just take a little bit of that mixture. Be careful, it can get hot, and rub it between your fingers. If you're not feeling any grain, you know the sugar's all dissolved. And then for the temperature, I always just check this with an instant read thermometer. And once you've reached that temperature and the sugar is dissolved, we're going to take it right off the heat. We're just going to dry off the bottom of this with a towel from any steam, and we'll pop this right onto our stand mixer, which we are going to want to fit with the whisk attachment for this step. I'm not saying this can't be done with an electric hand mixer, but it is going to be a lot more work. You're going to be standing there a while, and your arm's probably going to get tired if you use a hand mixer. So our next step is to beat these egg whites until we have reached stiff peaks. I'm just going to turn on the mixer and gradually increase the speed to medium-high, and then continue to let it beat until we have stiff peaks. Of course, I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, but this usually takes about 10 minutes. It's going to take longer if you're using a hand mixer. It's actually been a bit less than 10 minutes. For some reason, it's moving quickly for me today, but you can hopefully see how right here we have a stiff peak. So the meringue, this mixture is really thick and billowy, it's opaque, it's increased in volume. And you can see that little peak that formed when I lifted the whisk out of the mixture. It's holding its shape, it's not folding in on top of itself, it's not dissolving back into a puddle. So this is a good point. I'm going to knock this off in here, and it's gonna be thick and sticky. We're actually done with the whisk at this point. I don't wanna leave any of that behind. And we're going to swap this out for a paddle attachment, which we don't need just yet, but I'm just gonna pop that on there so I don't forget. And now we have to play the waiting game. So most likely this is still really hot, and you just want to take the bowl and touch the bottom of it right here. If it feels warm, it's not ready to move on because you're going to end up melting your butter. So we need to let this cool down, and that just requires some patience. How long it takes is going to depend on your kitchen. So this is just going to sit for a little bit. All right, our bowl is finally cooled down. So now we begin adding the butter. And as I mentioned, your butter should be pretty close to room temperature, but you don't want it melty or oily. If you want to get super technical, I aim for the butter to be a temperature of about 64 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but it doesn't have to be that exact. Not super cold, not super warm, close in temperature to your meringue. And we're going to start adding the butter 1 tablespoon at a time. We'll add the tablespoon, we're going to let that get completely incorporated so we don't see the butter anymore before we add our next one. And we're just going to repeat until we've added all of the butter. And I usually just keep the mixer on about medium speed while I'm doing this. Sometimes I crank it up a little bit when I'm impatient. Sometimes, especially if the butter isn't quite the right temperature or if your meringue is a little bit too warm, you may notice the buttercream frosting starts to break and even curdle a little bit. If this happens, just keep mixing. It can also happen if you're adding your butter too quickly. If you keep mixing and it's just not working, I'm going to recommend you pause. You take your bowl off of the mixer, pop it in the fridge, and just leave it in the fridge for 10 minutes, bring it back, and then start mixing it again, see if that fixes it. Even when the frosting breaks, it can usually be recovered. It just takes a little bit of patience. And you'll notice the meringue kind of loses its fluffiness and it's going to look more liquidy as you're adding the butter. This is normal. And if you notice some of that meringue on the side not getting knocked in, just use your spatula to scrape that in so you're getting a nice even frosting, evenly combined frosting. And our last tablespoon. Now, once that last tablespoon of butter is completely incorporated into your frosting, we're going to turn the speed up to high and just beat it for another 15 seconds or so. What we're looking for is the frosting to be nice and smooth and thick. All right, let's take a look. This actually looks beautiful. Frosting has come together really nicely, but we're not done yet. We still want to add our flavoring. So I'm using vanilla extract. You could use a different flavoring if you preferred, but I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. And if you wanted to color this frosting, you would just add that here as well. Gel food coloring works really well with this frosting. It works really well with most frostings. Gives you a nice vibrant color. My favorite is, I forget if it's called Americolor or Amerigel, but Amera something works very well. All right, let's beat this in. Do a quick pause to scrape our bowl one more time, especially the bottom. It's KitchenAid, so a lot of stuff can hide on the bottom there. One more mix. So the frosting is finished at this point. You can use it however you'd like. It pipes really well. You can use it under fondant. It's a beautiful, really smooth, silky frosting. Baker's tax on that paddle right there. Don't worry, it won't be wasted. And I'm just going to drop this in a piping bag just so you can see how smoothly it pipes. I don't even need to do all of it. Let's show you how this pipes on some cupcakes. This is not all of the frosting. This recipe makes like 5 cups of frosting. So this will easily cover a 2-layer 9-inch or 8-inch round cake or a 13 by 9 cake, including giving you some extra for decorating. This is just my 846 tip. You can just see how prettily this pipes. It kind of has an almost marshmallow feel to it. It's not marshmallow frosting, don't get me wrong, but something about it just reminds me of that, which makes sense because there's some similar ingredients. I hope you enjoyed this. If you try it, I would love to know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. No cupcake needed. That was a lot, but that was good. I'll just do some of that. Oops. Ooh. Hey, oh, for that. And this can be popped right onto our stick. Separating equal. Does that make sense? There's no rush here. Oh no, the frosting's going everywhere. And I'm just going to put this in a piping bowl.